Hey everybody, my name is Marcus Stewart, and welcome to Call It In the Ring, the only wrestling podcast in existence and the greatest one by default. We are talking about Smackdown Live, the October 9th show of 2018, emanating live from Indianapolis. We've got a big show, we got fallout from the Super Showdown, and we've got some major build towards Crown Jewel as well as Evolution. So let's hop to it. This show kicks off in a really big way as we immediately open with a SmackDown Women's Championship rematch between Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. Of course, their Super Showdown match ended in a DQ, an intentional disqualification by Becky Lynch. So this time, the stipulation is that Becky can lose the title on a disqualification to eliminate any shenanigans. This was a very, very good match, which is not surprising. It was also a long match. It took up about roughly the first half hour of the show. And it's hard to kind of break it down a bit because it was just a lot of just very evenly matched back and forth and just the standard just slick and polished chain wrestling and counters and just the chemistry that these two women have just on full display here. And it was just, I was super sucked into this match and wondering who was gonna walk out with the belt. At one point late in the match, Becky tries to walk out with her title which is a nice loophole, because though the title can change hands on a disqualification, that doesn't mention anything about countout, but Charlotte puts a stop to that pretty quick. Towards the end of this very competitive match, there's a slight ref bump where Becky accidentally sends Charlotte lightly into the ref, like she more or less just kind of shoves him, and then he kind of, I don't know if it was supposed to be harder, but he kind of has to sell a little bit that it was more of an impact than it really was. But thankfully he wasn't like down and just acting like he just got hit by a truck. But Becky tries to hit her with the belt, but the ref turns around pretty quick and catches her. And this leads to the ref almost calling for the DQ until Flair tries to roll up Becky for the pin, but this leads to just multiple counters. At one point, Charlotte misses her patented moonsault that she tends to somewhat over-rotate on whenever she hits it on the floor, where she more or less kind of has to land on her feet, but kind of her legs give out under her. But it looked painful just on the knees, like just having the moonsault from that high. And Charlotte's a pretty big girl, like she's very tall. So it just looked awkward, like if you, I don't know if this is morbid or not, but almost like if you threw a horse off of a building and a horse had to try to land on its feet. And I'm not calling Charlotte a horse, but I don't know, for some reason that's what I thought of her legs like just kind of slipped under her because she's so tall and she's coming from so high. But that just looked brutal on the knees. But this eventually spills to the outside, and they're both being counted down, but neither woman seems to realize where the ref's count is. And then at about a count of 9, Charlotte throws, instead of just throwing Becky back into the ring and I guess herself, she just kind of opts to throw her into the stairs. And this leads to a double count out. We don't get a winner. Becky retains the title by default. And this feud is going to continue. And after the match, Becky tries to bail, and Charlotte is not having any of it. And they continue to battle on the ramp with Becky kicking Charlotte down on the stage and trying to get away from Flair. But then Flair catches Becky by rushing her and spearing her through the entryway, like through the stage, not unlike Rhino spearing Chris Jericho through the Smackdown stage way back in the day. like in 2001 or whenever it was. So she spears Becky through the LED boards at the entrance way, which looks pretty brutal because those are like some just square panels and a lot of sharp edges. And then that proves to be the case because the two are just crumpled in between the wreckage, and then the ref and the trainers managed to kind of get Charlotte out of there. And she is bleeding pretty significantly from her right arm, which is not surprising because, again, she more or less speared Becky through just a bunch of tiles, like just some sharp-edged tiles. So I was like, oh, that looks painful. So hopefully she's okay there. We heard a few updates throughout the night about Charlotte's arms. They're like, yeah, she'll be fine, and she's good enough to compete in the Mixed Match Challenge later that night after the show. But yeah, this was a really great way to open the show. A really hot match, got me sucked right into the action, and then a really big finish. And this feud has been taking up to the next level, as we'll see later on. Our next match is the World Cup, or a World Cup qualifying match between Jeff Hardy and Samoa Joe to see who's going to start filling up slots on the Smackdown side. And I think yesterday during my Raw review, I think I was, it sounds like I was incorrect about what the World Cup is, where I said that it was going to be an 8-on-8 tag match between the two brands, but it seems to be a tournament but it's just going to have 4 participants from each brand. So it's an 8-person tournament in general, and then only 1 person will win. But I don't know. It's been the way that they worded it was confusing. I think it's just the way they were saying how they're going to have 4 from each brand. It made it sound like it was teams. But it seems to be a traditional tournament. So that makes a bit more sense. This is cool to see. This is the first time Jeff Hardy and Samoa Joe have faced each other in WWE. Of course, they've had numerous battles during their TNA days. Jeff targets Joe's very injured knee, which is smart by him, and even kind of gets a little vicious with it, just stomping, loses his belt at one point, and is just going after that knee as he should. And then this eventually leads to Joe, who's trying to fight back. He can't stand, like he literally can't stand to the knee. And then in a rare occurrence, the ref has to stop the match. Like he throws in the towel for Joe, and Jeff wins by forfeit, I guess. So I was wondering who's going to win this, because both of these guys came in needing a win, because this is Jeff's first appearance in about a month since he lost to Randy at the Hell in a Cell. And of course, Joe is coming off a big loss to AJ Styles at Super Showdown. So it's like, okay, both of these guys could use this win, but who do they go with? And I was leaning towards Joe, but then I was like, well, he's got that knee injury too, so that would be a perfect excuse to have him lose here without really making him look weak, and that's the route that they went with. So Jeff will join John Cena and Kurt Angle in this tournament, but totally fine match. I'm curious to see where the Joe injury angle leads him. We go to Paige backstage, who makes a rematch between Becky and Charlotte at Evolution in the first ever last woman standing match, which makes sense for this story. So looking forward to seeing that. This brings us to Miz TV with AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan as guests. Of course, these two will be facing each other for the WWE Championship at Crown Jewel. Miz says that Paige has warned him to try to remain a professional throughout this. Bryan and Styles kind of take turns ripping on Miz, with Bryan, of course, bringing up the fact that he gets a pretty good burn on Miz, where he talks about why Miz was only talking about AJ Styles' match and not bringing up their match. And he's like, well, to be fair, you wouldn't really have much to talk about because of how short it was. And then starts calling Miz the 2-minute man. And these two show a lot of mutual respect to each other to have a handshake, which Miz is very much against. He's kind of dissing them this whole time for their sportsmanship, calling them both boring, and saying that nobody wants to see a sportsman-like contest. They want to see conflict and all of this stuff, and trying to pit them against each other, trying to egg them on. It does not really work. AJ talks about how just saying that Bryan is worthy competition, but at the same time, he's never fought someone that was phenomenal and kind of a nice little subtle burn to Miz. Bryan goes into a nice little speech about how becoming WWE champion was the real dream that he's had since coming back. Like his dream was not just to come back or to reunite Team Hell No or to battle The Miz or any of that stuff. His true dream was to once again reach the top of the mountain, and that he views AJ Styles as the best wrestler in the company because he's held on to that belt for 11 months and has beaten everyone that's come at him. And he's actually he's glad that AJ believes that he's the best because he's earned the right to think that. And I guess it'll make it more satisfying when because he knows deep down that he can beat AJ Styles. And these two face off a bit, and then eventually, and then Miz is really excited to see that these two might come to blows. But then they turn their attention to the Miz and start with AJ asking, "How good does it feel, Bryan, to punch Miz in the face?" And Bryan saying, "Oh my God, you have no idea. It feels great." And AJ's like, "I know, I knocked his tooth out one time," which I'd forgotten about that, but that was during AJ's first couple of months in the company when he had a match against Miz and actually did knock one of his teeth out doing the, if I remember correctly, it was the Phenomenal Blitz. Caught him with that backhand. And then Miz going on a really nice rant, as he usually does, about how he's sick of both of them and how he beat Bryan and that even and claiming that his shoulder was up at Crown Jewel, which it actually really wasn't. But saying that he went to Paige to get a rematch, but then Paige just gave him this match because Bryan's a charity case, and then turning his attention to Styles, saying that he's just Daniel Bryan with a southern accent, and saying that the title has never meant less than when he's held it, because it's how many pay-per-view main events has he had as WWE champion, which is true, that part, not the devaluation of the title. I mean, he did take it from Jinder Mahal. So, but then Miz tells AJ that he doesn't have to worry about him right now because he's going to face the man that beat Daniel Bryan. And that man is Shelton Benjamin, which is up next. And man, this was cool to see because once upon a time, this was considered something of a dream match, AJ Styles versus Shelton Benjamin, way back in like 2005. I remember just on the internet, his like message boards at the time, when Shelton Benjamin was like the absolute like biggest breakout star in WWE back in 2005 when he was just killing it every week. And everyone was saying that, man, he is we want to see him against AJ Styles, who at the time in TNA was the face of the company. Young upstart. I guess upstart sounds weird, I guess. But yeah, he was like the young face of the company, just doing all these crazy things. This was around the time that I started hearing about AJ Styles and TNA and started checking out the show to see who this guy was. And I'm going like, oh yeah, this AJ guy is awesome. And then and it got to a point where even at the time, people consider Shelton Benjamin as kind of WWE's answer to AJ Styles because of how just insanely athletic and how much of a mirror image he was to AJ. And yeah, it's crazy that like 13 years later, we're finally getting this dream match that people were clamoring for. Like, man, can you imagine those two against each other? And this match was fine. It didn't have enough time to really get going. It had a decent amount of time. Miz and Bryan were on commentary, and of course they spent the entire time just being really kind of catty with each other. But it's entertaining. But yeah, like I said, the match gets a decent amount of time, but it's more I would say angle advancement, but it's a good match for what it is. And I would love to see a longer showdown between these two. AJ picks up the win by hitting the phenomenal forearm, and we continue our road towards Crown Jewel. So I'm curious to see, because face versus face title matches are not easy to do. If you need recent proof, look at Shinsuke Nakamura versus AJ Styles leading into WrestleMania. But this already has a bit more story behind it than that match did, because they're not just going with this is a dream match, and that's about it. They're sowing some seeds of conflict, but there's a lot more. Like, Bryan has the backstory of like fighting his way back, and finally after all these months fighting his way back towards an opportunity to get to the top. And AJ for the first time in his title reign, I believe he's finally getting to face an opponent that isn't going to stab him in the back, probably, or be underhanded. He gets an honorable challenger. So we'll see if Bryan maintains that honor. But I'm looking forward to seeing that match because the first time they fought each other, right around the time that Bryan came back, but it ended in a no contest because Shinsuke interfered, with some really good stuff. So that was kind of the sampler for what we're gonna get at Crown Jewel. So can't wait. Aiden English comes out and he's got the rest of the One Night in Milwaukee tape. And he talks about how he was offered 6 figures to sell the tape to various media outlets, but he's not going to do that because he's going to show us the additional footage. So he shows us the tape. It kind of picks up roughly where we left off last week, where we get to see the Aiden and Lana in Aiden's hotel room, and she says she has to tell him something real quick, and she says, "I want you," and then the rest of it was that she wants to tell Aiden how much it means, like his singing and his just general cheerleader stuff means to Rusev and Lana, and how she appreciates what he's done for Rusev's career. And Aiden's like, "Oh shucks, don't mention it," basically. And then she's like, "No, really, it's great. You're great stuff." And then Aiden moves in on her. He kind of gets close and looks like he puts his arm on her back. And then that's where we pause again. And then he promises to show more, but he has an idea. He's going to give Rusev a deal. If Rusev ditches Lana, and I don't know what that means. Does he want him to straight up get a divorce or whatever? Because that's a bit much to ask. But if he ditches Lana and comes back to Aiden and they reform Rusev Day, then he will destroy the tape and not show the rest of it, because that's ultimately what he wants. He's competing for Rusev's affection from his wife, because he said that we were the best thing going together. So it's like, if Rusev does that, we don't have to see the rest of this. Rusev comes out with Lana and says, "Well, this seems really important, so why don't you just show the rest of it?" And Aiden says, "Nah, I can't do that. This is a PG show. Just come on, just come back home, come to the dark side. You have no idea what the power is of the dark side. You get really good singing abilities." And Lana and Rusev were like, "Okay, we'll just show it for you." And Aiden's like, he laughs this off. So like, "How are you gonna do that?" And then Lana says, "Because you've been hacked, son." She didn't say son, but she did say that Aiden was hacked. And at first I thought they were going to go like a Russian angle with this, because obviously Lana, even though she is not actually Russian, like by birth, if I remember correctly, she did grow up in Russia. That's why she can do the accent so well, because she legitimately knows Russian and lived in Russia for many, many years. So she may as well be, she's kind of Russian, may as well just be a Russian American or American Russian, whatever you want to call it. So I thought they were going to go that angle with it, of like, oh, because she's Russian, she knows how to hack things. I got it. Which would have been kind of silly and somewhat racist maybe, or stereotypical at least. But no, what it was that she says it was very easy to hack into his phone because his password is I Heart Rusev, and which is not very hard to figure out. And then against Aiden's will, they show the rest of the video, and what we see is that after Aiden kind of tries to make a move on Lana, Lana is weirded out, like, whoa, cowboy, slow down, like, that's not what I meant. And then Aiden, of course, is super embarrassed and feels like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean. And then they have this awkward, like, and she's like, I'm just gonna go. And Aiden's like, no, I'm so sorry. And she leaves. And then Aiden's standing in the hotel room feeling really, really silly and just embarrassed. And then he kind of realizes that the phone is filming still, and he turns it off. So Aiden's they got him, and he admits that, okay, the jig is up, but hey, the offer still stands, Lana. If you get tired of those Rusev days, feel free to come and have an Aiden night. And that's about as much as Rusev can take. And he sprints to the ring. Aiden tries to bail through the crowd, but Rusev freaking teleports there and catches him before he can get past the barricade, really. Throws him back over. Aiden tries to run in the ring, barely dodges a Machka kick and runs his ass up the ramp, barely managing to escape the Bulgarian wrath of Rusev. So yeah, this little Milwaukee thing has been wrapped up. It's always nice to have sometimes things get wrapped up in a nice, concise manner. That this didn't feel like it was rushed or that they ended it too soon. It's like, nah, you can only drag that out so long. So I'm actually fine that this part of the story is done. So now we can just move on towards building towards a match. Again, Aiden, I have no reason to believe has any physical chance against Rusev, but maybe it'll just be Rusev just squashing Aiden and being really satisfying. You just want to see Aiden get his. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to see what other tricks Aiden might have up his sleeve. That's kind of the only defense that he can have against someone as powerful as Rusev. So good stuff here. Good stuff. We get an ad for Rey Mysterio, who's going to be making his return next week. Next week is going to be the 1000th episode of Smackdown, which doesn't feel like it's gotten nearly the amount of hype as you... Well, let me rephrase that. It feels like it hasn't gotten nearly as much hype as even by WWE paying attention to Smackdown standards, because obviously it was never going to get the hype of, say, the 1000th episode of Raw got, or any sort of Raw milestone show. Like, there's been some commercials here and there, and then I think they haven't even really shown any major historical, like, clips. Like, I think the only thing I remember them showing was John Cena's debut, which was on Raw yesterday. But you would think in the weeks building up to this, we would see more of, like, hey, classic Smackdown moment. This thing happened. I don't know. Stone Cold destroys the DX Express, or Eddie Guerrero's title celebration, or whatever it may be. But we really haven't gotten that outside of the Cena debut thing that just felt like, oh yeah, shit, we got this 1000 show. We should probably show something really big that happened. Evolution, of course, will be back next week, which is, I think the fact that that's such a just weird and just random thing, because like I said before, Evolution as a team has literally no history on SmackDown whatsoever. The entire team's run was on Raw. I mean, individually, outside of Flair, the other three have his individual histories on SmackDown, but as a group, no. But lost in that confusion is the fact that Batista's returning to WWE TV. This will be his first appearance since 2014 with the last Evolution run. So that's a big deal, especially given that Batista's a big, Hollywood star now. So I for some reason that just, I think that's gone over a lot of people's head because they're billing them as a faction and not like, oh crap, Batista, this big Hollywood star, is coming back to SmackDown. He's just kind of being advertised in a group. So that's a big deal. But yeah, I'm curious to see what even the hell they have to talk about. And also how Randy's going to fit in, since Randy is a mega heel right now and enjoys pulling the wings off of flies. How he's going to mesh with Triple H, who I guess is a face at the moment with the DX stuff. And I guess Flair is always a face basically by default because he's a legend. And then whatever Batista winds up being, probably a face just because he's been gone for a while. People will be happy to see him. But yeah, I'm curious to see how they interact here. If hopefully he doesn't try to rip Dave's ears off, because Batista has really big ears. So, but yeah, Rey Mysterio will be returning next week, and not only just returning, but he's gonna have a match. He's gonna be in the World Cup tournament qualifying thing. He's gonna be taking on Shinsuke Nakamura, which that's a dream match. Holy shit! I don't know if they've ever faced each other like outside of WWE. Obviously, never in WWE. But man, what a match! That's something you put on a milestone show. Like, there you go. Now SmackDown 1000 feels special. So I'm really looking forward to see how that goes down. And also, The Undertaker's going to be returning next week, which you just have to do. I mean, it's The Undertaker. The SmackDown was his show forever. I hope we see some surprises, like, you feel like Edge would have to be there because Edge is another guy heavily associated with SmackDown. it probably won't happen, but of course, The Rock is always one you want to see out there, considering it was his show, more or less. But yeah, I'm curious to see what they do next week. 1000th episode. It should be a fun show, hopefully. This brings us to the main event of the night. We've got Randy Orton in a World Cup qualifying match taking on The Big Show. And this is Big Show's first match in about a year. If I remember correctly, his last match was that cage match on Raw against Braun Strowman that ended with him being like suplexed or no, he got power slammed through the cage wall, like the wall collapsed and like he was basically dead. And so yeah, this is his first match back. And of course, these two have a big history. They've been partners in the Authority. They've been opponents, including main eventing a pay-per-view for the title in a very not good match. But this match was better than that match. Big Show looked pretty good here, even earning a "You Still Got It" chant, which is quite the 180 from the "Please Retire" chant he used to get a few years ago. So, if there's any better example of absence making the heart grow fonder, I don't know what there is other than this. So, but this was not super long. Big Show hit his usual stuff and looked pretty good doing it, with Orton just trying to fend him off. Orton manages to get the win after getting a sneaky rake to the eyes without managing to obscure the ref's view. And then as Big Show is trying to fix his giant eyes, he takes a big RKO. Like Randy had to jump and get some airtime to hit this RKO. The first RKO Randy's hit in some time, because he's kind of stopped doing it to not pop the crowd, which has been some nice heel psychology. But it makes sense for the Big Show. He needs that one home run win to get the 1, 2, 3. So Orton's team alongside Jeff, his old rival, are representing SmackDown in the World Cup. Randy does not try to torture Big Show after the match, thankfully. He doesn't try to stick his beard into a meat grinder or try to heat up some pins and then try to stick those pins into his eyes or any of that crap. He doesn't try to crucify Big Show, thankfully. He allows him to live. And that wraps up the show. So just a pretty whatever main event. Just for the novelty of seeing Big Show again. That was kind of cool. But yeah, this was a good show. The opening match, as I said before, was awesome. And it was cool to see stuff like like AJ versus Shelton. Got some nice build for Bryan, the WWE Championship match at Crown Jewel. The World Cup stuff is pretty cool, if for no other reason of it just being different. And I'm something of a sucker for tournaments in general, so this is cool. And I'm excited for next week. Like I said, 1000th episode of SmackDown. Hopefully it's a hell of a show. We get some cool clips, and hopefully it's more of a celebration of the show and less focused on kind of current storyline advancement, which can sometimes be the downfall of these big shows, because they try to do both. And for me personally, when it's a big milestone show like this, or like Raw 25 or whatever it may be, I'd rather it just the current storyline stuff take a backseat and just let it be a nostalgia celebration kind of show of I just want to see old faces come back and see some old clips and maybe see some interactions with the current stars and the top stars, but nothing substantial in terms of current story advancement. So hopefully SmackDown is more of that. It should help that the pay-per-view is, any of the pay-per-views are still weeks away, so they don't have to, they can afford to kind of put that stuff on hold relatively. So I hope that's what we're getting. But anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I will be back next week for my review of Monday Night Raw, as well as the 1000th episode of SmackDown Live. If you want to talk to me on Twitter about all of this stuff, you can do so at MarcusStewart7. That's the number 7. And you can find this show on YouTube, iTunes, and Podbean at Marcus Writes About Games. Share it with all your wrestling-loving friends. I'd really appreciate it. So until next time, wrestling fans, I will see you next week. Have a good one.